Imagine holding a piece of bronze in your hand, a simple tool, a broken weapon, or a fragment of an ancient sculpture. To the untrained eye, it might seem like nothing more than a relic of a bygone era, but hidden within its metallic structure lies a story waiting to be told. A story written not in words, but in chemistry, a tale of journeys, discoveries, and human connections that span thousands of years. This is the world of archaeometallurgy, where scientists and historians are decoding the secrets of civilizations through the very alloys they once forged. It turns out that bronze, the metal that helped build empires and shape cultures, carries a unique chemical signature, a fingerprint that reveals where it came from, who made it, and how it traveled across continents long before maps or written records could document such journeys. Think about the vast trade routes of the ancient world networks that stretched from the tin mines of Cornwall all the way to the palaces of Mesopotamia, or from the copper-rich hills of Cyprus to the ritual workshops of China. For centuries, these connections were little more than speculation, hinted at in fragments of texts or the occasional archaeological find. But now, thanks to breakthroughs in science, we can trace these pathways with astonishing precision by analyzing the composition of bronze artifacts. Elements like tin, copper, and trace metals such as arsenic or lead act as silent witnesses to history, each impurity or isotope ratio serving as a clue to the origins and movements of the people who crafted and traded these objects. It's almost like listening to whispers from the past, whispers that tell us about ambition, innovation, and the universal human drive to explore, create, and connect. In this video, we're going to embark on a journey across time and space, guided by the metallic signatures of bronze. We'll uncover how this alloy first developed over 5,000 years ago, not only revolutionized technology and warfare, but also became a catalyst for cultural exchange on a scale that still resonates today. From the smelting techniques of the Indus Valley to the maritime trade of the Mediterranean, from ritual vessels in ancient China to weapons used in legendary conflicts, bronze has stories to tell, stories of collaboration, conflict, and resilience. So settle in and get ready to see history in a whole new light, as we explore how this humble metal continues to map the world of our ancestors, revealing mysteries that written records alone could never uncover. Picture a world where humanity's most advanced tools were still made of stone, bone, or simple, easily bent copper. Then, around 5,300 years ago, in the Fertile Crescent of the Near East, a transformative discovery unfolded. An unknown, ingenious artisan, perhaps by accident, perhaps through deliberate experimentation, heated together copper and a rare, silvery metal called tin. The result was nothing short of alchemy, an alloy far superior to any metal known before. This was bronze, harder than copper. It held a sharp edge for tools and weapons that could change everything. More durable, it could be cast into intricate shapes for art and adornment. This was not merely an incremental improvement. It was a quantum leap in material science that would echo for millennia. The creation of bronze ignited a chain reaction of progress. With stronger, more efficient bronze sickles and plow tips, farmers could cultivate land more effectively, leading to food surpluses that supported larger, more concentrated populations. This was the bedrock upon which cities were built. At the same time, the development of bronze weaponry, swords, spearheads, and armor reshaped the very nature of conflict and power. Societies that mastered bronze technology gained a significant military advantage, allowing for expansion, conquest, and the consolidation of territory into some of the world's first empires. But bronze's influence extended beyond the practical. It also fueled artistic expression. For the first time, metalworkers could cast complex, detailed sculptures, jewelry, and ceremonial objects, giving tangible form to cultural beliefs and aesthetic values. This alloy became a fundamental pillar supporting the entire structure of complex civilization. Crucially, the knowledge of how to make bronze did not remain a secret held by a single culture. This revolutionary technology began to diffuse, radiating out from its Near Eastern birthplace like ripples in a pond. It moved westward into Europe, where it would define entire archaeological cultures. It traveled eastward across the vastness of Asia, reaching the Indus Valley and beyond. It spread into Africa, influencing societies along the Nile and deeper into the continent. This was one of humanity's first great episodes of technological globalization. However, this spread was about so much more than just a recipe for metal. It represented the transfer of ideas, of cultural practices, of entire worldviews. Wherever bronze technology arrived, it was never simply copied. It was adapted, reinterpreted, and integrated into local traditions. The movement of metalworkers and their knowledge meant the simultaneous movement of language, religious symbols, and social customs. A bronze sword found in a chieftain's grave in ancient Britain might share a basic metallurgical formula with a dagger from Mesopotamia, but its design, its decoration, and its cultural significance would be uniquely local. This interplay between a shared technological base and distinct cultural application is precisely what makes bronze such a powerful historical lens. The story of its emergence isn't just about a stronger metal. It's about the beginning of deeply interconnected human networks, setting the stage for us to trace those very connections through the metal's unique chemical fingerprints. So how do we actually read these metallic fingerprints? It all comes down to the unique impurities and isotopic signatures locked within the metal itself. When ancient smelters heated ore to extract copper or tin, tiny, trace elements from the original rock elements like arsenic, nickel, or silver were carried along into the finished metal. Crucially, the specific combination and concentration of these trace elements acts like a mineralogical birth certificate, because the ore from every single mining region on Earth has a slightly different chemical personality. An artifact with high levels of cobalt and bismuth, for instance, could instantly point geologists to a specific set of mountains in Iran, while the complete absence of those elements and the presence of antimony might point unmistakably to a different set of mines in Spain. But the most powerful detective tool in this scientific toolkit isn't the trace elements, it's lead isotope analysis. Now, don't let the term intimidate you. The concept is beautifully elegant. Lead has 4 stable isotopes. Think of them as 4 different forms of the same element. The ratio of these 4 isotopes to one another varies in the Earth's crust based on the age and geological history of the rock formation. This means that a lead isotope ratio is effectively a geographic coordinate. It doesn't just tell us the type of ore, it can often pinpoint the exact mine the metal came from, because the isotope ratio from, say, the vast copper mines on Cyprus is completely distinct from the ratio found in ore from the Sinai Peninsula. Even the tin, that incredibly rare and vital ingredient, can be traced. While trickier, analyzing the tin isotopes themselves can differentiate between sources in Cornwall, Afghanistan, or Central Europe. This transforms a static museum display into a dynamic travel log. Take a simple bronze axe head dug up in a field in Greece. Through these analyses, we might discover its copper originated from the famous mines of Cyprus. Its tin was hauled all the way from Cornwall in Britain, and a small amount of added lead, used to make the molten metal flow easier for the smith, came from a source in the Aegean. Suddenly, this single object is no longer just an axe, it's a tangled web of journeys. It tells us that 3,500 years ago, someone in Greece had access to a trade network so sophisticated and far-reaching it could bring materials from the farthest corners of the known world right to their workshop. A humble ingot of metal becomes a silent witness to ancient economics, diplomacy, and human ambition, revealing connections between cultures that historians might never have deduced from pottery styles or fragmented texts alone. But while copper was relatively widespread, the true magic of bronze required a second, far more mysterious ingredient: tin. This soft, silvery metal was the essential catalyst, the element that transformed malleable copper into something revolutionary. And herein lay the great challenge of the Bronze Age. Tin was incredibly, frustratingly rare. Unlike copper, which could be found in many regions, major tin deposits were few and far between, scattered in just a handful of locations across the entire globe. The most significant sources were in Cornwall at the southwestern tip of Britain, in the Erzgebirge Mountains straddling modern Germany and the Czech Republic, and in the remote highlands of Afghanistan. This extreme geographical concentration meant that no single civilization, no matter how powerful, had reliable local access to all the resources needed to make bronze. They were forced to look outward to engage with a wider world. This scarcity turned tin into a commodity of immense value, a material worth traveling thousands of miles for and worth going to war over. The quest for it became a primary driver of exploration, trade, and international diplomacy. We have remarkable written evidence of this from ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. Cuneiform tablets from the city of Mari on the Euphrates River detail intricate negotiations and trade agreements for tin, treating it with the same strategic importance as a modern nation would treat oil. Egyptian records speak of great expeditions sent to distant lands, navigating by the stars and negotiating with foreign rulers to secure this precious cargo. A single ship carrying tin ingots was a floating fortune, its contents capable of arming an entire army or supplying a kingdom's workshops for a year. The lengths to which these ancient peoples went underscore a simple, powerful truth. Without tin, there was no Bronze Age. Today, we can map these desperate, ambitious journeys with stunning accuracy, not from ancient texts alone, but from the tin itself. Modern science allows researchers to analyze the isotopic composition of tin within bronze artifacts. Just as with lead isotopes in copper, the ratios of different tin isotopes vary depending on the geological age and formation of the ore body. This creates a distinct signature for tin from Cornwall that differs from tin in Afghanistan or Central Europe. By taking a tiny sample from a Bronze Age sword found in Greece or a ceremonial vessel from Turkey, scientists can now determine precisely which corner of the ancient world its crucial tin component originated from. The results of this isotopic detective work have been nothing short of revolutionary, painting a picture of interconnectedness that rivals our modern global economy. We now have evidence that tin from Cornwall was being traded all the way to the eastern Mediterranean over 3,000 years ago. Artifacts from Israel have been linked to tin sources in Afghanistan. This means that a metal mined from deep underground in foggy, wind-swept Cornwall could end up in the hands of a Mycenaean warrior or an Egyptian artisan. These weren't just random, occasional contacts. They were the lifelines of civilization, a complex web of overland routes and maritime passages that moved this critical resource across continents and cultures. The story of tin is the story of humanity's first great logistical challenge, proving that even in antiquity, no culture was truly an island. Their survival and success depended on a network of connections, all forged in the pursuit of a rare, gleaming metal. While the quest for tin drove ancient traders across continents, copper formed the massive, more accessible backbone of the entire bronze industry. This reddish metal was far more common than tin, found in numerous locations across the globe, but its story is no less fascinating. Not all copper was created equal. The quality of the ore, the ease of extraction, and the sheer scale of certain deposits created a complex and uneven economic landscape. In some regions, surface-level malachite and azurite provided relatively easy pickings, while in others, mining meant tunneling deep into the earth, a dangerous and technologically demanding endeavor. This variation meant that while many cultures had access to some local copper, only a few locations became true powerhouses of production, their output destined to travel across the known world. The island of Cyprus in the eastern Mediterranean stands as the quintessential example of a copper superpower. Its very name is derived from the Latin word for copper, cuprum, a lasting testament to its defining resource. From around 2500 BC, the Cypriots were mining and smelting copper on an almost industrial scale. The sheer volume of slag, the rocky waste left over from smelting, found at ancient sites like Politico-Forades, is staggering, indicating centuries of intensive production. This wasn't a small-scale operation. It was the engine of the Mediterranean Bronze Age. The copper from Cyprus, often cast into distinctive oxhide-shaped ingots for easy transport, has been found in shipwrecks, hoards, and archaeological sites from Egypt to Sardinia. Control over this resource made Cyprus a critical player in international politics and trade, a coveted partner for empires like the Hittites and the Mycenaeans. But the Mediterranean was not the only stage for this copper drama. Half a world away, in the Andes Mountains of South America, ancient cultures were also mastering copper metallurgy, though they used it primarily for ceremonial objects and tools rather than for bronze on a massive scale. The Moche people, for instance, became spectacularly skilled at crafting intricate copper masks, jewelry, and decorative items, often gilding them with gold through a sophisticated electrochemical process. Their sources in the highlands fueled a distinct artistic and technological tradition. Meanwhile, in North America, around the Great Lakes region, vast deposits of nearly pure copper were mined by indigenous peoples for thousands of years. They fashioned the metal into tools, weapons, and ritual objects, and evidence suggests some of this copper traveled through extensive trade networks across the continent. This shows that the story of copper is a global one, with multiple centers of innovation emerging independently. So how can we be so certain that a particular bronze artifact contains Cypriot copper or metal from the Sinai? The answer lies once again in the metal's hidden chemical diary. Beyond the trace elements, scientists rely heavily on lead isotope analysis. Remember, lead occurs naturally in copper ores as a minor impurity. The ratios of lead's four stable isotopes, lead 204, 206, 207, and 208, are set by the geological history of the ore body. They act as an unchangeable fingerprint. Geologists have painstakingly created massive databases of these isotope ratios from ancient mines across Europe, the Mediterranean, and the Near East. When an archaeologist finds a bronze object, they can take a tiny sample, measure its lead isotope ratio, and then match that ratio to the database. The match can be so precise that it can often pinpoint not just a region, but the specific mine the copper came from, whether it's the rich veins of Cyprus or the smaller workings of the Timna Valley in the Sinai Desert. This sourcing does more than just map trade. It reveals the remarkable technological adaptability of ancient metallurgists. Different copper ores required different smelting techniques. Oxide ores like malachite are relatively straightforward to smelt, but sulfide ores, which are far more common, require a complex process of roasting and smelting to drive off the sulfur and extract the pure metal. The ability to process these more difficult ores represents a major technological leap. By tracing copper back to its source, we can see where and when these innovations occurred. For instance, the switch to mining deeper sulfide ores in Cyprus around 1200 BC required new furnace designs and a much greater understanding of chemistry. This wasn't just about finding rock and heating it. It was about a continuous, intelligent refinement of process. The journey of copper, from its rocky imprisonment deep underground to its transformation into a gleaming object of utility and beauty, is one of humanity's greatest early stories of perseverance, innovation, and connection. Now, the process of simply mixing copper and tin was just the beginning. The true mastery of the ancient metallurgist was revealed not in the sourcing of the materials, but in the subtle, sophisticated art of the alloy itself. Think of it like a master chef. Finding high-quality ingredients is one thing, but knowing exactly how to combine them, in what proportions, and with what additional flavors to create a specific and desired result, that is where true artistry lies. Every culture, every regional workshop, even individual smiths developed their own signature recipes for bronze, creating a rich tapestry of technological traditions that we can now read like a historical text. These recipes were far from random. They were deliberate choices, a complex negotiation between the materials available, the intended purpose of the object, and deep-seated cultural preferences. For a large, intricate statue that needed to be cast in a single pour, a smith might intentionally add a small percentage of lead to the alloy. Lead lowers the melting point of the bronze and makes the molten metal far more fluid, allowing it to flow into every minute detail of a complex clay mold without cracking or creating bubbles. This was a practical solution to a technical challenge. Conversely, for a weapon like a sword or an axe head that needed to hold a deadly sharp edge and withstand brutal impacts, lead would be a terrible choice. It makes the metal softer. Instead, a smith might seek out arsenical copper ores or even intentionally add arsenic to the melt. Arsenic hardens bronze significantly, creating a weapon that is less likely to bend or blunt in combat. In some Andean cultures, they achieved a similar effect by adding a small amount of tin to copper, but then subjecting the finished object to a careful process of hammering and annealing, cold working the metal to make it even harder. This shows an incredible hands-on understanding of metallurgical properties. These variations in alloy composition create what scientists call metallurgical traditions, distinct and recognizable fingerprints of technological culture. By analyzing the chemical makeup of hundreds of bronze artifacts from a particular region, patterns begin to emerge. We might discover that throughout the entire Bronze Age, artisans in ancient China consistently used a relatively high tin content, often between 17% and 20%, for their magnificent ritual vessels. This high tin content gives the bronze a beautiful silvery golden hue and a much harder, more resonant quality, which was perfect for the elaborate surface decoration and the solemn ceremonial use these vessels were designed for. It was a conscious aesthetic and cultural choice. Meanwhile, in the Mediterranean, a much wider range of recipes was used, often with lower tin percentages and frequent additions of lead, reflecting a more diverse and adaptable technological landscape focused on mass production and trade. This allows archaeologists to do something remarkable. They can map cultural boundaries and interactions not by pottery styles or burial practices, but by the very metal itself. If a hoard of weapons found in Central Europe suddenly shows a shift from a low tin, local recipe to a high tin, leaded alloy that is characteristic of the Mediterranean, it isn't just a change in chemistry. It's evidence of trade, of technological influence, perhaps even of migrating metalworkers bringing new techniques with them. Conversely, a long period of technological stagnation, where alloy recipes remain simple and unchanged for centuries, might hint at a society that was isolated, or perhaps one that was in decline, having lost access to trade networks or the innovative spark of its artisans. The art of alloying was a living, evolving dialogue. It was a conversation between the smith and their materials, between practicality and beauty, and between cultures separated by vast distances, all speaking the universal language of metal. These chemical signatures allow us to trace not just the movement of objects, but the very pathways they traveled, revealing a map of ancient globalization that was far more extensive and sophisticated than we ever imagined. One of the most famous of these reconstructed highways is the Amber Road, a network of routes that stretched from the Baltic Sea all the way down to the Mediterranean. For centuries, we knew northern amber was highly prized in the royal courts of Mycenae and Egypt, but bronze provides the other half of this incredible exchange. It tells us that while luxury goods like amber traveled south, essential raw materials and finished bronze goods flowed north in return. A bronze spearhead found in a chieftain's grave in Denmark, when analyzed, might reveal its tin came from Cornwall and its copper from the Eastern Alps. This single object becomes proof of a 2,000-mile trade network, a testament to the fact that a leader in Scandinavia 3,500 years ago could wield a weapon forged from materials spanning the European continent. This wasn't a simple, linear path. It was a sprawling web of local and long-distance exchanges, with goods changing hands countless times at river crossings, mountain passes, and coastal trading posts. The story becomes even more dramatic when we look to the sea. The maritime trade between Mesopotamia and the distant Indus Valley civilization, centered in modern-day Pakistan and India, is a classic example of Bronze Age connections that were once purely theoretical. For a long time, archaeologists noted similarities in weights, measures, and a handful of Indus-made seals found in Mesopotamian cities like Ur, but the evidence was fragmentary. Then bronze entered the picture. Scientific analysis of Mesopotamian bronze artifacts began to reveal a startling fact. Some of the copper used in these objects bore a chemical signature that matched known ore sources not in nearby Oman or Cyprus, but far to the east in the Indus Valley region. This was a revelation. It meant that ships, likely hugging the coast of the Arabian Sea, were undertaking voyages of thousands of miles, carrying cargoes of Indus copper to the great city-states of Sumer. In return, those ships would have brought back Mesopotamian goods, perhaps textiles, oils, or grains, and, just as importantly, Mesopotamian ideas. This metallic evidence solidifies the theory of a truly international Bronze Age economy, where the fortunes of a civilization in South Asia were directly linked to the demands of another in the Middle East. Perhaps no single find better illustrates the sheer complexity of this system than the humble bronze ingot. These were the standardized units of trade, the ancient equivalent of a barrel of oil or a gold bar, and their distribution maps the economic arteries of the ancient world. The most iconic of these are the so-called oxhide ingots, named for their distinctive shape with 4 protruding corners, which made them easy to carry on poles by teams of men. Thousands of these ingots have been found all across the Mediterranean, from Sardinia to the Black Sea coast. For decades, it was assumed they all came from the great copper island of Cyprus, the likely origin of the design. But chemical analysis has revealed a more nuanced story. While the vast majority are indeed Cypriot, the oxhide shape was so effective and recognizable that it became a kind of international standard. We now have evidence that copper from other sources, and even tin ingots from unknown locations, were sometimes cast into this same familiar shape to facilitate trade. This means that the form of the ingot was a symbol of trust and guaranteed quality, a brand name that transcended language barriers. Finding one of these in a shipwreck or a hoard far from home is like finding a universal logo. It instantly communicates what it is and its inherent value, a testament to the development of sophisticated commercial practices in a world we often think of as primitive. These trade routes did so much more than move metal and luxury items. They were the information superhighways of their day, conduits for the flow of culture, technology, and belief. A merchant traveling the Amber Road didn't just bring amber, he brought stories, news of different peoples, and perhaps new ideas about metalworking or religion. A sailor docking in Mesopotamia from the Indus Valley might introduce new sailing techniques or artistic motifs. We can see this cultural exchange reflected in the artifacts themselves. The design of a sword, the decorative pattern on a ceremonial dagger, or the religious symbolism cast into a bronze plaque often shows a blend of influences, a hybrid style that could only emerge at the crossroads of trade. A weapon found in Greece might have a shape local to the region, but its metallurgical composition is entirely foreign, while its decorative inlay uses a technique perfected in Egypt. This object is a physical embodiment of cultural fusion, proving that these long-distance connections were about more than economics. They were the threads that wove together the very fabric of the ancient world, creating a shared sphere of innovation and ideas that stretched from the frigid Baltic to the sun-baked Indus, all facilitated by the relentless, world-spanning journey of bronze. This intricate web of trade did far more than simply fill royal treasuries or armed soldiers. It acted as a powerful, silent engine for the exchange of culture itself. When a bronze object traveled, it never journeyed alone. It carried with it the aesthetic sensibilities of its maker, the spiritual beliefs of its patron, and the technological knowledge of its smith. A beautifully cast ceremonial dagger from Mycenaean Greece, traded to an elite in Cyprus, wasn't just a weapon. It was a statement of power, a piece of art, and a demonstration of a superior casting technique. The local Cypriot ruler who received it might be inspired. He might commission his own artisans to copy its intricate inlay work, or attempt to replicate the specific alloy that gave it such a perfect balance and ring. In this way, the movement of metal became a primary vehicle for cultural diffusion, subtly shaping art, religion, and even political structures across vast distances. We can see this process vividly in the transmission of bronze working from ancient China into Southeast Asia. The Shang and Zhou dynasties developed a bronze culture unlike any other, focused not on weaponry for the battlefield, but on magnificent ritual vessels for communicating with ancestors. Their piece mold casting technique was incredibly sophisticated, allowing them to create complex shapes like the Ding cauldron or the Gu wine vessel, adorned with the powerful Tauti mask motif. This technology and artistic style did not stay confined within China's borders. Over centuries, it slowly filtered southward. In what is now Vietnam, archaeologists have found bronze drums, like those of the Dong Son culture, that clearly show a fusion of ideas. The use of high tin bronze for a silvery appearance and the intricate scenes of daily life cast in relief on the drum heads show a clear technological and artistic debt to Chinese methods. Yet the object itself, a drum used in community ceremonies and possibly to communicate with spirits, is uniquely Southeast Asian. It wasn't a slavish copy, it was an adaptation. The Chinese idea of using bronze for ritual power was adopted, but it was expressed through a local cultural lens, creating something entirely new and powerful. This is cultural exchange in its purest form, not replacement but creative synthesis. Similarly, in the Mediterranean, the influence of Mycenaean Greek metalwork rippled out across the region. The Mycenaeans were master bronzesmiths, producing everything from formidable boars' tusk helmets to exquisitely inlaid sword scenes of hunting and warfare. Their goods and the artisans who made them were highly sought after. As their products were traded along the coasts of Anatolia and the Levant, their stylistic influence began to appear. Local artisans in places like Ugarit started to produce weapons and figurines that blended their own traditional styles with distinctively Mycenaean features, such as particular ways of depicting human figures or certain decorative spiral patterns. This wasn't just about fashion, it often signaled deeper political and social alignments. A local chieftain adopting Mycenaean-style armor and weaponry might be making a conscious statement about his connections to a powerful and prestigious international power, using bronze to elevate his own status and authority within his community. The metal became a language of diplomacy and prestige. Perhaps the most profound cultural exchanges happened with objects that had direct religious significance. Small bronze figurines of deities traded or carried by migrants could introduce entirely new gods into a pantheon. A casting technique for a specific type of cult statue, once seen as effective for capturing the divine presence, could be adopted and adapted by a foreign culture for their own worship. The spread of the so-called smiting god figurines depicting a vengeful deity brandishing a weapon across the Near East and into the Aegean shows how a potent religious symbol could travel alongside the copper and tin used to cast it. Each culture that adopted this imagery would interpret it slightly differently, applying their own god's name and attributes to the powerful form. The bronze object acted as a catalyst, transmitting a core spiritual concept that was then localized and made meaningful to a new people. This interplay between the material and the cultural shows that bronze was never a passive resource. It was an active participant in human history, a medium through which ideas about power, beauty, and the divine were shared, debated, and woven into the ever-evolving fabric of ancient societies. But this incredible alloy that fueled the growth of cities and the exchange of culture also had a darker, more brutal purpose. Bronze fundamentally reshaped the nature of conflict, turning skirmishes into organized warfare and local disputes into campaigns of conquest. The very attributes that made bronze perfect for a farmer's plow, its strength, durability, and ability to hold a sharp edge made it devastatingly effective for the soldier's sword. For the first time in history, an army's success could be directly tied to its access to advanced metallurgy. A kingdom with rich copper mines or control over a tin trade route could field a force equipped with weapons that were simply superior to anything an adversary could muster. This created a terrifying new arms race where securing metal sources wasn't just an economic advantage, it was a matter of national survival. The military innovations were profound. The bronze spear, with its long, sharp, and sturdy point, became the backbone of infantries, allowing for the development of the phalanx formation. The bronze sword, from the long, slashing Roman II type that spread from Europe to the shorter, thrusting styles of the Near East, gave warriors a versatile and lethal sidearm. And perhaps most importantly, bronze body armor cuirasses, greaves, and helmets offered a level of protection previously unimaginable. A warrior clad in bronze was a walking fortress, nearly invulnerable to the stone-tipped arrows and copper daggers of less-equipped foes. This technological disparity didn't just win battles, it forged empires. The ability to equip thousands of soldiers with this advanced panoply required a centralized authority, a complex economy, and a steady, guaranteed flow of raw materials. Warfare became a state-sponsored enterprise, and bronze was its currency. This brings us to the fascinating detective work of modern archaeology. When we unearth a cache of bronze weapons from an ancient battlefield, their chemical composition can tell us a story that written histories often omit. Take the legendary Trojan War, immortalized by Homer. For centuries, it was considered a blend of myth and vague memory. But archaeological evidence confirms a great city was indeed sacked at the site of Troy around the traditional date of the conflict. And the bronze weapons found there are now speaking volumes. Analysis has shown that the bronze used in arrowheads and spear points found at the site comes from a wide variety of sources, some local to Anatolia, some from further afield. This doesn't prove the existence of Achilles or Agamemnon, but it does provide compelling physical evidence for what the epic poems describe. A massive coalitional force from across the Aegean, each contingent likely bringing its own weapons and armor, forged from the metals of their homelands, converging on the citadel of Troy. The metal confirms the scale and international character of the conflict, moving it firmly from pure myth into the realm of plausible history. We can see an even clearer picture with the Assyrian Empire, history's first true military superpower, whose ruthless campaigns were meticulously recorded on stone reliefs. The Assyrian war machine was insatiable in its demand for bronze. Chemical analysis of weapons from Assyrian sites reveals a fascinating strategy. Some are made from metals sourced from within the empire's controlled territories, showing a well-organized domestic military-industrial complex. But many others show signatures from far beyond their borders, from Cyprus, from Anatolia, even from the Caucasus. This is the material evidence of tribute and plunder. As the Assyrians conquered a region, they would not only seize its existing stocks of weapons, but also force the subjugated population to pay a regular tribute in raw metal or finished goods. A sword taken from a defeated enemy in the Levant might be melted down and recast in an Assyrian workshop, its foreign metallic signature forever blended into the empire's arsenal. This practice allowed the Assyrians to turn the resources of their enemies against them, creating a self-sustaining cycle of conquest where each victory fueled the next. The bronze in an Assyrian soldier's hand wasn't just a weapon. It was a map of the empire's expansion and a ledger of its brutal economy. Beyond the battlefield and the marketplace, bronze found its most eloquent voice in the hands of artists and artisans who transformed this utilitarian metal into objects of breathtaking beauty and profound spiritual significance. This was where the soul of a civilization was poured into molten metal and cast into eternity. From the colossal statues that guarded temples to the delicate jewelry that adorned the elite, bronze became a canvas for human creativity, a medium to express everything from divine ideals to personal vanity. And just as with weapons and tools, the specific chemical composition of these artistic pieces holds invaluable clues, not just about how they were made, but why they were made that way, revealing the intimate dialogue between an artist's vision and the material science of their time. Consider the ancient Chinese bronze mirror. For over 2 millennia, these were not mere grooming aids but powerful ritual objects, believed to harness light to reveal truth, ward off evil, and even communicate with the spirit world. To achieve the perfectly polished, highly reflective surface required for this, Chinese metallurgists developed a very specific recipe, an alloy with an exceptionally high tin content, often around 20 to 25%. This high tin bronze is extremely hard and when polished takes on a silvery, almost mirror-like finish with a slight golden hue. But it comes with a cost. Such an alloy is also incredibly brittle and difficult to cast without cracking. The fact that Chinese founders consistently chose this challenging composition for mirrors tells us that the aesthetic and ritual requirement for a perfect reflection completely outweighed practical concerns of durability. The metal itself was subservient to a higher cultural purpose. Analyzing these mirrors shows a remarkable consistency in this high tin formula across centuries, pointing to specialized, state-sponsored workshops where the secret of this ritual alloy was carefully guarded and passed down through generations of master craftsmen. This principle, that alloy composition was a deliberate artistic choice, extends to the grandest scales of bronze statuary. The magnificent statues of ancient Greece, like the Artemision bronze or the Rhais warriors, were not cast from a single, standard recipe. Metallurgical studies show that Greek sculptors and their foundry teams were master chemists, tweaking their alloys for different parts of a statue. The main body might be a standard, strong copper-tin mix, but for thin, extended features like locks of hair or a slender spear, they would often add a significant amount of lead. The lead made the molten metal more fluid, allowing it to fill the most intricate parts of a complex mold and capture every minute detail of the sculptor's original model. It was a sacrifice of structural strength for the sake of artistic fidelity, a calculated trade-off to achieve a specific visual effect. Even the famous Statue of Liberty, a modern colossus, tells a similar story through its composition. Her skin is made from pure, tough copper, hammered to a thinness of just 2 pennies. But for the internal support structure and the massive torch arm, engineers used a different, stronger material, wrought iron. This combination of materials was the late 19th century's version of an advanced alloy, each chosen for its specific properties to solve the immense engineering and artistic challenges of creating such a monumental figure. By peering into the elemental makeup of these artworks, we move beyond simple appreciation and begin to understand the very thought processes of the artists and their patrons. A bronze ceremonial vessel from ancient Mesoamerica, analyzed and found to contain traces of gold, might indicate it was made for a ruler of immense wealth and status, the precious metal added as a deliberate display of power and access to rare resources. The consistent use of arsenical bronze for intricate jewelry across the Near East, despite the health risks to the smith, points to a cultural preference for its particular silvery white color and superior ability to hold fine detail over the more common, yellower tin bronze. These were not arbitrary decisions, they were calculated choices made within a cultural and economic context. The bronze itself becomes a historical document, recording the priorities, values, and technological capabilities of the society that produced it. It shows us that the drive to create beauty has always been intertwined with a deep, practical understanding of the material world, a perfect fusion of art and science that continues to resonate thousands of years later. Yet for all its brilliance and cultural dominance, the Age of Bronze was not destined to last forever. A new metal was waiting in the wings, one that would eventually redefine technology, warfare, and society itself, iron. But the shift from bronze to iron was never a simple, overnight revolution. It was a slow, uneven, and often reluctant transformation that unfolded over centuries and played out differently in every corner of the ancient world. This wasn't a case of a clearly superior technology immediately replacing an old one. It was a complex dance dictated by scarcity, tradition, and the immense practical challenges of mastering a far more difficult material. And remarkably, the story of this great technological transition is itself recorded in the changing chemical signatures of the bronze artifacts from this turbulent period. The primary driver for this shift was often necessity, not choice. The elaborate international trade networks that had sustained the Bronze Age were incredibly vulnerable. Around 1200 BC, a perfect storm of events often called the Late Bronze Age collapse swept across the eastern Mediterranean and Near East. A wave of mysterious sea peoples, widespread famine, internal rebellions, and possibly climate change led to the fall of nearly every great empire of the era. The Hittites, the Mycenaeans, and even mighty Egypt was brought to its knees. This apocalyptic scenario caused those vast, carefully maintained trade routes for copper and, most critically, tin to sever and disintegrate. Overnight, the lifeblood of bronze production was cut off. Societies that had depended on imports from thousands of miles away suddenly found themselves without access to the tin needed to make new bronze. This crisis forced them to look locally for alternatives, and iron ore was one resource that was almost everywhere. You didn't need to trade with a distant, powerful king to get it. You could find it in boggy ground or in common surface-level deposits. In a shattered world, iron's greatest advantage was its availability. However, early iron was not inherently better than high-quality bronze. In fact, for a long time, it was significantly worse. The process of smelting iron is far more complex than bronze. Bronze smelting requires a temperature of around 1000 degrees Celsius, achievable in a simple pit furnace. Iron, however, requires a much hotter and more carefully controlled environment, up to 1300 degrees Celsius, to separate the pure metal from the ore and to absorb just the right amount of carbon to create steel, a strong and useful alloy. Early smiths without this knowledge often produced what is called sponge iron, a brittle, crumbly mass full of impurities that had to be painstakingly hammered and reheated to drive out the slag. The result was often an object that was no harder and far more prone to corrosion than a well-made bronze weapon. For centuries, iron was primarily used for decorative or ceremonial items, a novelty for the elite. A famous iron dagger found in the tomb of the Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun, who ruled long before the collapse, was a priceless rarity, its value lying in its exoticism and the immense difficulty of its production, not its practical superiority on the battlefield. This is where the analysis of bronze artifacts becomes a powerful tool for dating and understanding this transition. As the Bronze Age crisis set in, archaeologists have found fascinating evidence in the changing composition of bronze objects. Suddenly, we see a dramatic increase in the recycling of existing bronze. Hordes of broken tools, shattered weapons, and chopped-up ingots become common, as societies desperately gathered every scrap of metal they could find to melt down and reuse. But when you recycle metal, its chemical signature becomes a chaotic mixture. A single newly cast sword from this period might contain traces of copper from Cyprus, tin from Afghanistan, and lead from Greece, all jumbled together from a dozen different melted-down objects. This scrambled metallic fingerprint is a clear signal of a society in crisis, one that has lost access to fresh sources of raw materials and is cannibalizing its own past. Furthermore, we see a rise in debased bronze's alloys where the percentage of precious tin is drastically reduced to make the material go further, sometimes replaced with cheaper, more readily available substitutes like lead or even arsenic. These inferior, poorly cast objects are the desperate attempts of a civilization holding onto a dying technology because the new one is not yet fully understood. The adoption of iron, therefore, happened in fits and starts. It often first appeared in everyday tools, agricultural implements like sickles, plow tips, and woodworking axes, where a slightly softer metal was acceptable. Bronze, now more scarce and valuable, was often reserved for prestige items, ceremonial vessels, jewelry, and the armor and weapons of the highest-ranking warriors. This created a strange period of overlap where a single society might be using iron for its farming and bronze for its warfare. Eventually, as iron working techniques improved, particularly with the development of carburization, a process of adding carbon to the iron to create true steel, the new metal finally surpassed bronze in strength and durability. Once smiths learned to quench hardened steel by rapidly cooling it in water, the age of iron truly began, but even then, bronze never completely disappeared. It retained its status for artistic and ceremonial purposes, its golden luster and easy castability ensuring its place for millennia to come, a lasting legacy of the first great metallic age of human history. For civilizations that vanished into the mists of time, leaving behind no grand libraries or stone inscriptions, their silent bronze artifacts become their most eloquent storytellers. Take the remarkable Neuragic civilization of Sardinia, which flourished for over a millennium. Across the island, they left behind thousands of enigmatic stone towers called Neuragic, but incredibly few written clues about who they were or how they organized their society. Their bronze figurines, however, are another matter. These small, intricate statues depict warriors, chieftains, and animals with a distinctive style, but it's their hidden chemical makeup that reveals the true sophistication of Neuragic culture. When scientists analyzed these figurines, they made a startling discovery. The bronze used across the island over many centuries showed a remarkable consistency in its alloy composition. This wasn't a random, decentralized effort. The uniformity points directly to a highly organized, centralized production system. It suggests that the Neuragic people had a structured society with specialized metalworkers who likely operated under the control of a powerful elite, using standardized recipes and perhaps even state-controlled sources of metal. This metallic evidence paints a picture of a complex, coordinated civilization, something we could never have deduced from the silent stone towers alone. On the other side of the ancient world, in the vast plains of Central Asia, lies the mystery of the Oxus civilization, also known as the Bactria-Margiana archaeological complex. This culture built impressive fortified cities and sprawling irrigation networks around 2000 BCE, but it left behind no decipherable writing system. For a long time, its origins and connections were a complete enigma. Were they an isolated culture, or were they a vital hub in a network we didn't know existed? The answer, once again, was locked in their bronze. Archaeologists began finding beautifully crafted bronze seals, vessels, and ceremonial axes in Oxus graves and temples. When subjected to lead isotope analysis, these objects told a revolutionary story. The metal did not come from a single, local source. Instead, the signatures pointed to a dizzying array of origins: copper from the mines of Iran and Oman, tin that likely traveled from as far away as Afghanistan. This diverse sourcing is the hallmark of a culture that was not isolated at all, but was in fact a critical crossroads of trade. The Oxus people were masterful intermediaries, connecting the Mesopotamian world to their west with the cultures of the Indus Valley and the Eurasian steppes to their east. Their bronze artifacts reveal they were the central players in a Bronze Age Silk Road, facilitating the exchange of not only goods but also technologies and ideas across continents. This pattern repeats itself across the globe. The uniformity or diversity of bronze alloys acts as a direct proxy for understanding a civilization's political and economic structure. A region where all bronze artifacts, from tools to ornaments, share an identical chemical fingerprint strongly suggests a centralized authority, perhaps a kingdom or a chiefdom, that controlled the entire production chain, from mining the ore to smelting and casting the final product. This level of control is a powerful indicator of social hierarchy and organized power. Conversely, a region where bronze objects show a wide variety of compositions tells a story of extensive trade, independent workshops, and a more decentralized, perhaps even mercantile society. Each bronze fragment, no matter how corroded or broken, carries this indelible record of its creation. For cultures that left no written annals, these metallic clues are the closest thing we have to an economic ledger or a diplomatic communiqué. They allow us to move beyond simply cataloging artifacts and begin to understand the living, breathing societies that made them. their governance, their economy, and their place in a wider world. Through the silent language of chemistry, bronze gives a voice to the voiceless, weaving scattered archaeological finds into a rich, coherent narrative of human endeavor. Imagine a storm brewing in the late 14th century BC, its dark clouds gathering over the eastern Mediterranean. A heavily laden merchant ship, its hull packed with unimaginable wealth, fights the churning waves off the treacherous coast of what is now Turkey. Then disaster. The ship is driven into the rocks and sinks, taking its precious cargo and the stories of its crew to the silent depths. There it would lie, undisturbed, for over 3,000 years until its discovery in the 1980s revealed not just a shipwreck, but a floating ledger of the Bronze Age world. This is the Uluburun shipwreck, and it is quite simply one of the most significant archaeological discoveries ever made, offering a perfectly preserved, moment-in-time snapshot of international trade at the height of the late Bronze Age. The sheer scale and diversity of the cargo is breathtaking. The dive teams brought up over 10 tons of raw metal alone, including 354 copper ingots, most of them cast in the distinctive four-handled oxhide shape for easy transport. Alongside this mountain of copper were ingots of tin, the crucial but elusive partner needed to transform it into bronze, but the ship was carrying far more than just raw materials. Its holds were a veritable supermarket of luxury goods and finished products, magnificent Canaanite jewelry of gold and silver, cobalt blue glass ingots from Egypt, ebony logs from Nubia, ostrich eggshells and elephant tusks from Africa, pottery from Cyprus and Greece, and even a golden scarab bearing the name of the Egyptian queen Nefertiti. This was no ordinary trader. It was a royal shipment, a floating embassy carrying diplomatic gifts, raw materials for palace workshops, and luxury items for the elite, connecting the great powers of the era. The real revelation, however, came from the laboratory, not the seafloor. When scientists conducted lead isotope analysis on the copper ingots, the results were definitive. The metal originated from the vast mines of Cyprus, the undisputed copper powerhouse of the ancient world. This confirmed long-held theories about Cyprus's central role in the Bronze Age economy. But the tin presented an even more astonishing story. Tracing tin is far more difficult, but the chemical evidence strongly suggests its origin was thousands of miles away in the remote highlands of Afghanistan. This single finding fundamentally rewrote our understanding of ancient trade. It meant that the commercial and diplomatic networks of the 14th century BC were not merely regional, they were genuinely global in their reach. For tin from Afghanistan to end up on a ship sinking off the coast of Turkey, it had to travel overland through Mesopotamia or across the Persian Gulf, then up the Levantine coast, changing hands through a complex chain of merchants, diplomats, and middlemen before being loaded onto this final, fateful voyage. The Uluburan wreck does more than just list trade goods. It illuminates the sophisticated mechanisms of this international system. The presence of standardized weights, including a set in the distinctive duck-shaped style of Mesopotamia, suggests the ship carried a merchant who could conduct business in any port, using a recognized system of value to trade and barter. The diverse personal belongings found on board, a sword from Italy, a seal from Syria, pottery from Greece, paint a picture of a multicultural crew, a microcosm of the interconnected world they sailed. This was not haphazard exploration, it was organized high-stakes commerce. The ship itself was a masterpiece of maritime engineering, its cedar planks sewn together with a technique that allowed it to flex and withstand the punishing waves of the open sea, capable of undertaking these long-distance journeys with an immensely valuable cargo. Ultimately, the Uluburan's greatest gift is its tangible proof of a deeply interconnected and interdependent ancient world. The ship's manifest reads like a map of Bronze Age globalization: Cypriot copper, Afghan tin, Egyptian gold, Mycenaean pottery, Canaanite amber, Nubian ebony. Every great kingdom and empire of the time was linked by this single vessel's journey. It proves that the palace economies of the Hittites, the Egyptians, and the Mycenaeans did not exist in isolation. They were nodes in a vast network, utterly dependent on the steady flow of these materials to sustain their power, their technology, and their luxury. The sinking of this one ship was likely an economic catastrophe that resonated in royal courts across the region, a stark reminder of the fragility of the threads that connected their civilizations. The Uluburun is our most compelling window into that lost world, a time capsule that allows us to stop theorizing and instead hold the very stuff of history in our hands. While the Mediterranean world was forging bronze into weapons and tools for trade and warfare, an entirely different bronze tradition was flourishing in ancient China, one where the metal's primary purpose was to communicate with the divine and solidify earthly power. Here, bronze was not for the battlefield or the marketplace. It was for the temple and the ancestral altar. The most magnificent creations of the Shang and Zhou dynasties were not swords or armor, but vast, awe-inspiring ritual vessels, cauldrons, wine goblets, and food containers of breathtaking complexity and size. These were not mere objects. They were the very instruments of statecraft and religion, used in sacred ceremonies to offer food and wine to the spirits of deified ancestors. It was believed that the favor of these ancestors directly determined the ruler's right to rule, his ability to bring good harvests, and his success in war. Therefore, the bronze vessel was a political tool of the highest order, a tangible symbol of the dynasty's divine mandate and its hierarchical, tightly controlled society. The technology developed to create these masterpieces was as unique as their purpose. While much of the world was using the lost wax method, Chinese metallurgists perfected an incredibly sophisticated technique known as piece mold casting. This process began not with a wax model, but with a clay model of the desired vessel. This model was then carefully fired to harden it. Next, a thin layer of wet clay was pressed onto the model to capture every minute detail of its intricate decoration. This outer layer was cut into sections and carefully removed, becoming the individual pieces of the mold. The original clay model was then shaved down slightly, becoming the core. The mold pieces were reassembled around this core, creating a narrow gap between them. This gap was the space into which the molten bronze would be poured. This complex, multi-part system allowed for the casting of incredibly sharp, precise decoration, including the famous Tauti mask stylized, glowering animal faces that were meant to ward off evil spirits. The technical achievement is staggering, requiring the coordination of teams of specialized craftsmen working under the direct supervision of the state. The chemical composition of these vessels tells a story of remarkable organization and control. Scientific analysis reveals that the Shang and Zhou dynasties maintained incredibly consistent alloying recipes over centuries. The typical ritual vessel bronze contains a high tin content, often between 17 and 20%. This specific formula was a deliberate choice. It produced an alloy that, when polished, had a beautiful golden silvery hue, far more luminous and prestigious than the duller yellow of lower tin bronze. More practically, high tin bronze is extremely fluid when molten, allowing it to fill the most intricate parts of those complex piece molds, capturing every fine line of the design. It also results in a harder, more resonant metal, a vessel that would ring with a clear, sonorous tone when struck during a ritual, adding an auditory layer to the solemn ceremony. This consistency across thousands of objects spread over a vast territory and hundreds of years points to one undeniable fact: a centralized, state-controlled metallurgical industry. By tracing the lead isotopes within the bronze, researchers have begun to map the astonishing logistical network that fed this industry. The key revelation is that the copper and tin used in the royal foundries of the Yellow River Valley, the heart of Shang power, did not come from local sources. Instead, the isotopic signatures point unmistakably to mines hundreds of miles to the south, in the middle and lower reaches of the Yangtze River Valley. This means the Shang state was orchestrating a massive, long-distance operation to secure its most critical resource. They established colonies, built roads, and likely exerted military pressure to control the flow of metal from the south to their northern capitals. This was not simple trade. It was a deliberate project of territorial expansion and resource extraction. The ability to control this pipeline of raw material was a fundamental pillar of royal authority. Without the bronze, there could be no ritual vessels. Without the vessels, there could be no communication with the ancestors. And without that divine connection, the king's power would evaporate. This deep connection between metal and power is vividly displayed in the aftermath of the Zhou conquest of the Shang around 1046 BCE. The victorious Zhou dynasty did not discard the bronze tradition. They appropriated and expanded it. They continued to produce ritual vessels in the same basic forms, but with a crucial ideological shift. Inscriptions cast inside the vessels became longer and more narrative, often detailing the specific event, a military victory, a royal gift of land for which the vessel was commissioned. These texts served as permanent metallic propaganda, legitimizing the new Zhou rulers by documenting their deeds and their right to rule. The control over bronze resources became even more centralized, distributed by the Zhou king to his loyal nobles as a reward for their service. To be given the bronze to cast a vessel was to be granted a share of symbolic power. The story of Chinese bronze, therefore, is not just a metallurgical history, it is a political one. It shows us a world where the control of technology and resources was inseparable from the performance of ritual and the projection of power, creating a unique and enduring civilization whose legacy was literally cast in bronze for eternity. We often picture the rise and fall of ancient empires as a story of kings, conquests, and cultural revolutions. But there was another, far more fundamental force silently shaping their destiny: the environment. The entire breathtaking enterprise of the Bronze Age, from the deepest mine shaft to the farthest trade voyage, was intimately tied to the natural world. Its success depended on a delicate balance of resources that we might take for granted today. The availability of vast forests to provide charcoal for smelting, the presence of reliable rivers for transporting heavy ingots, and even the stability of the climate itself. These were not just background details. They were the absolute prerequisites for creating and moving the metal that defined an era. When these environmental conditions shifted, the entire complex system could shudder, forcing ancient societies to demonstrate incredible resilience and ingenuity to survive. Consider the most basic requirement: fuel. Smelting copper and tin ore is an incredibly energy-intensive process. To achieve the searing temperatures of over 1000 degrees Celsius required to separate metal from rock, ancient metallurgists relied on one thing: charcoal made from wood. This created an insatiable demand for timber. A single bronze workshop supporting a small city would have consumed acres of forest every year. We can see the archaeological evidence of this today. In Cyprus, the great copper-producing island, studies of ancient pollen samples show a dramatic decline in certain tree species during the peak centuries of bronze production, replaced by plants that thrive in deforested landscapes. This wasn't a local problem. The same pattern emerges near major mining sites in the Alps and the Middle East. The very act of creating bronze was literally changing the face of the continents, driving deforestation on an industrial scale. This forced communities to make difficult choices. They had to travel further and further for wood, organize large-scale forestry operations, or, crucially, innovate. The need to conserve precious fuel likely drove the development of more efficient furnace designs and smelting techniques, a direct technological response to an environmental pressure. Beyond the fires of the forge, climate dictated the pathways of trade. The great river systems were the freight highways of the ancient world. The Nile in Egypt, the Tigris and Euphrates in Mesopotamia, and the Danube in Europe were vital arteries for moving tons of metal. A period of reliable rainfall and stable water levels meant these routes were open, predictable, and safe. But what happened during a prolonged drought? Rivers could shrink to unnavigable trickles, making the transport of heavy copper ingots impossible. Overland routes became more dangerous as pastoralists, whose grazing lands were dying, might turn to raiding trade caravans for survival. We can now correlate these climatic events with shifts in the chemical signatures of bronze. Scientists studying ice cores from Greenland and sediment samples from lakes can reconstruct detailed climate records for the Bronze Age. When they layer this paleoclimatic data with the lead isotope analysis of bronze artifacts, fascinating patterns emerge. A powerful example comes from the region of the Aegean Sea around 1200 BCE, a time of great upheaval. Climate data suggests a period of severe, prolonged drought coincided with the chaotic collapse of the great Bronze Age palaces of the Mycenaeans and Hittites. Right at this time, the chemical fingerprint of bronze found in Greece begins to change dramatically. Earlier bronzes show a consistent use of copper from Cyprus and tin from distant sources like Afghanistan. But as the drought takes hold, the bronze becomes a chaotic mixture. We start to see evidence of frantic recycling of existing metal and a desperate turn to any local, and often inferior, copper sources that could be reached without relying on collapsed long-distance trade networks. The metal itself tells a story of a civilization struggling to adapt to a world where its old connections have been severed by environmental change. It's a stark reminder that even the most powerful empires were not masters of their world, but partners in a delicate dance with nature. This interplay between climate and human activity wasn't always a story of collapse. Sometimes it was a catalyst for astonishing adaptation. In the Andes Mountains of South America, ancient metalworkers faced a very different set of environmental challenges. The high-altitude mines were located in a harsh, oxygen-thin environment where building large, hot fires was incredibly difficult due to the lack of wood and the thin air. Instead of trying to fight their environment, they learned to work with it. They developed a unique, highly efficient wind draft furnace technology that used the powerful, constant mountain winds to naturally stoke their fires to the necessary temperatures, a brilliant innovation that turned an environmental challenge into an advantage. Similarly, in Britain, the discovery of bronze artifacts in peat bogs has been linked to periods of rising water tables. It's believed that during times of environmental stress or changing religious beliefs, communities made offerings of their most valuable possessions to the gods of the water, seeking favor or forgiveness. The environment, therefore, didn't just shape how bronze was made, it shaped the very meaning and value it held in the human imagination. The story of bronze is ultimately a profound lesson in resilience. It shows us that the course of history was not written solely by human hands, but was a collaborative effort between our ambition and the enduring, powerful rhythms of the natural world. This incredible scientific process, which allows us to read the metallic diaries of ancient objects, comes with a profound and often difficult responsibility. Every time a researcher decides to take a tiny drill sample from a 3,000-year-old sword or a ritual vessel, they are making a permanent alteration to a unique, irreplaceable piece of our shared human heritage. This is the central ethical dilemma of archaeometallurgy, the unavoidable trade-off between gaining new knowledge and preserving the physical integrity of the artifact itself. The process is minimally destructive, but it is destructive nonetheless. A small hole is drilled, often in a discrete location like the tang of a sword blade or the base of a statue, and a few milligrams of metal are extracted for analysis. While this might seem insignificant, it represents a permanent loss. The question every museum curator and scientist must grapple with is whether the information gained is worth that small but forever sacrifice. To navigate this delicate balance, the field operates under a strict set of ethical guidelines that prioritize the object's long-term survival. The golden rule is that analysis should never be performed on an object that is uniquely beautiful, completely intact, or of such pristine quality that any damage would be a tragic loss to our aesthetic and cultural appreciation of the past. Instead, researchers almost always seek out samples from broken fragments, objects that are already heavily corroded, or items that are not on public display, like pieces found in excavation waste heaps or stored in museum archives. The information sought must also be justified by a clear research question that cannot be answered by any other non-destructive means. For example, using a technique like portable X-ray fluorescence, which can analyze surface composition without contact, is always the first step. It's only when that surface reading is unreliable due to corrosion, or when the critical isotopic data hidden within the metal's core is needed, that the more invasive sampling is even considered. This careful, case-by-case evaluation ensures that the pursuit of data never overshadows the duty of preservation. Perhaps an even greater ethical challenge than the physical sampling is the issue of provenance, the documented history of where an artifact was found and how it came into a museum or laboratory. The brutal truth is that the illicit antiquities trade is a multi-billion-dollar global enterprise, and looted bronze artifacts are a major part of that black market. When a beautiful Bronze Age sword or a ceremonial axe appears on the art market without any archaeological context, its scientific value is already massively diminished, even if its monetary value is high. A looted object is a stolen story. We may be able to analyze its alloy and learn that its copper came from Cyprus and its tin from Cornwall, but we have lost everything else. We don't know which chieftain it was buried with, what other objects were placed alongside it, or what settlement it came from. This lack of context severs the object from the web of relationships that give it its true historical meaning. This creates a serious ethical bind for scientists. Performing a destructive analysis on a looted object not only damages it but could potentially increase its commercial value by providing a fancy scientific pedigree, thereby incentivizing further looting. For this reason, reputable institutions and researchers have a strict ethical mandate. They will not analyze any artifact that does not have a clear and legal provenance. They must be certain the object was obtained through a documented archaeological excavation or has an ownership history that stretches back to before international laws against antiquities trafficking were enacted. This is why the published research papers you read will always include a lengthy section on the provenance of the samples they used. It is a necessary badge of ethical practice. By refusing to study looted material, scientists help break the cycle of demand that drives the destruction of archaeological sites, protecting countless other stories still waiting to be discovered in the ground. Ultimately, these ethical guidelines are not about hindering science. They are about ensuring that our curiosity today does not compromise the ability of future generations to learn from the past. Technology is always advancing. The techniques we have today, as amazing as they are, will likely seem crude in 50 years. Future scientists may develop methods to extract the same isotopic data using a completely non-destructive laser scan or an AI-powered imaging technique we can't yet conceive of. By minimizing damage now, we are preserving the option for those future discoveries. It's a philosophy of humility, recognizing that we are temporary stewards of these objects, not their ultimate owners. Every bronze artifact is a unique bridge to our collective past, and the ethical considerations in studying them remind us that the goal is not just to extract data, but to foster a deeper, more respectful conversation with history itself, ensuring these metallic voices can continue to speak for millennia to come. The true revolution in our understanding of ancient bronze didn't come from a new archaeological dig, but from the quiet hum of machines in scientific laboratories. For centuries, the stories hidden within these artifacts were locked away, accessible only through educated guesses based on their shape, style, and where they were found. But today, we have a whole new set of keys to unlock these metallic time capsules, and they come in the form of incredibly sophisticated analytical techniques that allow us to see the invisible. These tools have fundamentally transformed archaeometallurgy from a speculative field into a hard science, letting the metal itself speak with a clarity we never thought possible. One of the most powerful and widely used tools in the modern museum is the X-ray fluorescence spectrometer, or XRF. This remarkable device looks like something from a science fiction movie, often a handheld gun-shaped unit that a researcher can simply point at an artifact. Here's how it works in simple terms. The instrument fires a beam of X-rays at the object. This beam excites the atoms in the metal, causing them to emit their own unique secondary X-rays. Every single element on the periodic table, copper, tin, lead, arsenic, silver, emits a signature X-ray with a specific energy. The spectrometer acts like a highly sophisticated ear, listening to this energy signature and instantly identifying each element present and in what quantity. The greatest advantage of XRF is that it is completely non-destructive. A curator can analyze the priceless bronze sword of a Mycenaean king without so much as leaving a dust particle on its surface, obtaining a detailed breakdown of its chemical composition in a matter of seconds. This allows for the rapid screening of hundreds of objects in a museum collection, building massive databases of chemical information that can be mined for patterns and connections. For situations where even more sensitivity is required, especially to detect the tiniest traces of elements that act as crucial geographic fingerprints, scientists turn to a technique called neutron activation analysis, or NA. This process is more involved but yields breathtakingly precise results. A tiny, almost microscopic sample, often just a few milligrams drilled from an already broken or damaged fragment, is placed inside a nuclear reactor. There it is bombarded with neutrons. This bombardment makes the atoms in the sample radioactive. As these now radioactive isotopes decay, they emit gamma rays with energies unique to each specific element. By measuring the gamma ray spectrum, scientists can detect over 30 different elements all at once, and at concentrations as low as 1 part per billion. It's like turning the volume up on the metal's faintest whispers, allowing us to hear trace elements that would be completely invisible to any other method. This incredible sensitivity is what allows researchers to distinguish between copper from two different mines in the same mountain range, providing a level of sourcing precision that was unimaginable just a few decades ago. Perhaps the most definitive tool for geographic sourcing is inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry, often coupled with a laser for sampling. This mouthful of a technique, abbreviated as LAICPMS, is the gold standard for isotopic analysis. It works by using a powerful but incredibly focused laser to vaporize a microscopic pit on the surface of an object, smaller than the width of a human hair. This tiny cloud of vaporized metal is then carried by a stream of gas into a super-hot plasma torch, which breaks it down into its constituent atoms and strips away electrons to create a beam of ions. This ion beam is then shot through a mass spectrometer, a powerful magnet that sorts the ions based on their mass and charge. For lead isotope analysis, this is the master key. The machine can count the individual atoms of lead 206, 207, and 208, measuring their ratios with phenomenal accuracy. Since this isotopic ratio is set by the geology of the original ore body and remains unchanged through smelting and casting, it provides an unchangeable passport for the metal, pointing directly back to its birthplace. This is the technology that allows us to say with confidence that the copper in an Egyptian statue definitely came from Cyprus and not from the Sinai Peninsula, or that the tin in a Baltic axe head made its way all the way from Cornwall. The continuous advancement of these technologies is pushing the boundaries even further. Portable versions of XRF and LIBS, another laser-based technique, now allows scientists to take the lab directly into the field, analyzing artifacts inside a tomb in Egypt or on a dig in Greece without the object ever needing to be moved, thus avoiding any potential damage from transport. Furthermore, researchers are developing entirely non-invasive methods for isotopic analysis using specialized lasers that don't even leave a visible mark on the object, preserving it perfectly for future generations while still extracting its deepest secrets. This ongoing scientific progress ensures that every bronze artifact in a museum's collection is not a static display piece, but a dynamic archive. With every technological leap, we gain the ability to read a few more pages of its story, uncovering connections between ancient peoples that they themselves might never have fully realized, all thanks to our ever-increasing ability to listen to what the metal has been trying to tell us all along. Unlocking the secrets held within a bronze artifact is like solving a complex puzzle where no single person holds all the pieces. It demands a round table of experts, each bringing a completely different set of skills to the investigation. An archaeologist might know exactly where an object was found and what it was buried with, providing the crucial context of its final resting place. A chemist can then step in, using a mass spectrometer to unravel its elemental makeup and trace its metallic DNA back to a specific ore body. But then a geologist is needed with their deep understanding of the Earth's crust to consult a database of mineral signatures and pinpoint the exact mountain range or even the specific mine that ore came from. Finally, a historian can scour ancient texts, cuneiform tablets, or temple inscriptions to cross-reference these scientific findings with written records of trade routes, royal gifts, or mining expeditions mentioned by long-dead scribes. This isn't a linear process, it's a continuous conversation where a chemical anomaly discovered in the lab can send an archaeologist back to re-excavate a site, or a historical mention of a forgotten mine can guide geologists to a new location for sampling. A brilliant example of this synergy in action is a large-scale project focused on Bronze Age Europe, where researchers were trying to understand the sudden and widespread distribution of certain bronze objects around 3,200 years ago. Archaeologists had uncovered remarkably similar bronze swords and axes across a vast territory, from the Nordic regions to the Carpathian Basin. The initial assumption was that these represented a massive invasion or a single, dominant culture spreading its influence. But when chemists analyzed the metals, the story got more complicated. The lead isotope signatures didn't point to one single source. They revealed a mosaic of different mines across Europe. This scientific data forced historians and archaeologists to rethink their theory. Instead of a story of conquest, the evidence now suggested a story of connectivity. It pointed to a highly developed and surprisingly peaceful network of exchange, where a shared appreciation for a particular weapon style did not necessarily mean a shared political identity. The objects were similar because the idea was fashionable, but the materials were local because communities were leveraging their own regional resources, a nuance that could only be revealed through the marriage of digging, chemistry, and earth science. This collaborative model is just as powerful when applied to the ancient Americas, though the questions and methods can be quite different. In the Andes, the Moche culture of ancient Peru was a master of metallurgy, creating stunning ceremonial objects from gold, silver, and copper. For a long time, the sources of their metals were a mystery. A team of archaeologists, geologists, and materials scientists embarked on a project to trace the origins of the copper used in famous Moche artifacts like the intricate masks and headdresses found in royal tombs. Geologists first identified potential copper sources in the nearby mountains and created a chemical and isotopic profile for each one. Meanwhile, conservators at museums carefully allowed tiny, microscopic samples to be taken from priceless Moche artifacts. The resulting analysis produced a stunning map of procurement. It showed that the Moche weren't just using the closest or easiest sources. They were selectively acquiring copper from specific, often distant, mines that produced ore with particular properties, perhaps a certain color or workability that was prized for ritual objects. This wasn't just an economic calculation, it was a spiritual one. The interdisciplinary approach revealed that the journey of the metal, from a sacred mountain to the hands of a priest-king, was as important as the beautiful object it became, a dimension of history that would remain completely invisible if each discipline worked in isolation. This fusion of the sciences and the humanities does more than just answer old questions. It fundamentally changes the kinds of questions we can think to ask. A historian reading a Hittite text about a treaty with Cyprus might learn of a shipment of 200 copper ingots. A chemist analyzing a Hittite bronze cup can prove that its copper indeed came from Cyprus. But when they work together, they can start to ask deeper, more profound questions. Was that single cup part of that recorded shipment? Did the consistency of the alloy change during periods of political tension, reflecting a disruption in trade? Did the value of bronze shift when it was acquired through trade versus through conquest? This collaborative spirit breaks down the artificial walls between the hard sciences and the liberal arts, proving that a full understanding of our past cannot be found in a lab report or a dusty scroll alone. It emerges from the vibrant, sometimes contentious, but always illuminating conversation between them, weaving separate threads of evidence into a richer, more resilient, and deeply human tapestry of history. Beyond the clangor of battle and the silent agreements of trade, bronze found perhaps its most profound and enduring voice in the realm of the sacred. For countless ancient cultures, this alloy was far more than a utilitarian material. It was a conduit to the divine, a substance believed to possess a spiritual resonance perfect for forging objects of worship, ritual, and cosmic significance. When a metallurgist cast a bronze statue of a god, they weren't just crafting an image, they were attempting to capture a fragment of the deity's essence, creating a physical home for a spiritual power. This sacred purpose influenced every single decision in the object's creation, from the specific geological sources of the ore to the very recipe of the alloy itself, embedding layers of symbolic meaning into its metallic structure. The choice of materials was never arbitrary for these ceremonial objects. In many societies, the color, sheen, and acoustic properties of different bronze alloys held deep symbolic value. A high-tin bronze, with its silvery, pale gold appearance and clear, ringing tone when struck, was often reserved for the most sacred of items. This wasn't just a matter of aesthetics. The luminous quality was frequently associated with celestial bodies, purity, and the otherworldly. In contrast, the deeper, richer yellow of a low-tin bronze might be used for objects associated with earthly power or fertility. We see this in the ritual vessels of ancient China, where the specific hue achieved by a precise 17 to 20% tin content was integral to the vessel's function in ancestor worship. The material itself was part of the ritual language, its visual and auditory properties acting as a sensory bridge between the human celebrants and the spiritual realm they sought to honor. Perhaps no artifact illustrates this fusion of material, sound, and spirit better than the magnificent bronze drums of Southeast Asia, particularly those of the Dong Son culture in Vietnam. These were not musical instruments in a mundane sense. They were powerful ritual objects central to community life. It was believed that the deep, resonant boom of a struck bronze drum could carry messages to the spirit world, summon rain for crops, or ensure victory in battle. The elaborate scenes cast in relief around the drumheads are a visual encyclopedia of their cosmology, depicting everything from feathered shamans and ritual ceremonies to constellations of stars and stylized animals. But the spiritual power wasn't just in the decoration, it was inherent in the metal. Metallurgical analysis shows that the makers of these drums used a very specific high-tin bronze, often exceeding 20% tin. This alloy is exceptionally hard and brittle, making it a terribly difficult material to cast something as large and thin as a drumhead without it cracking. The fact that they persisted with this challenging recipe confirms that the desired sonic quality, that specific, otherworldly ring and sustain, was a non-negotiable sacred requirement. The technological difficulty was a price worth paying to achieve a sound fit for the gods. This principle extended across the ancient world. In the Mediterranean, the bronze statues that filled temples were not passive decorations. They were active participants in cult worship. They were bathed, dressed, and fed through offerings, treated as living embodiments of the divine. The composition of the bronze for these statues was often carefully tailored to their function. A large cult statue might be cast with added lead to ensure the molten metal flowed perfectly into the mold, capturing every delicate fold of the deity's robe or curl of their hair. This ensured the image was a perfect and worthy vessel for the god's presence. Similarly, small bronze votive offerings, miniature limbs, animals, or figures, cast by pilgrims and left at healing sanctuaries or oracle sites, were made from alloys that often matched the personal wealth of the donor. The choice of a purer, more expensive bronze for a votive was itself an act of piety, a material demonstration of devotion, and a sacrifice of valuable resources to gain divine favor. Through the lens of modern science, we can now trace how these religious ideas and the associated metallurgical knowledge traveled along trade routes, creating fascinating hybrids of belief and technology. The influence of Chinese bronze casting techniques and cosmological symbols can be seen in the ritual objects of neighboring cultures, but they were never merely copied. Instead, they were adapted and integrated into local spiritual frameworks. A symbolic motif from one culture might be fused with a local deity from another, all cast in an alloy that blended imported metal with local ores. This process of religious and technological syncretism shows that the exchange of bronze was simultaneously an exchange of ideas about the universe, the afterlife, and humanity's place within it. The metal became a universal medium for this dialogue of faith. its enduring nature a perfect metaphor for the eternal truths it was used to represent, connecting the physical and spiritual worlds in a way that no other material of the age could achieve. Think of the Bronze Age economy not in terms of coins and banks, but as a vast, interconnected system powered by the relentless flow of metal. This was an economy built on weight and value, where the very substance of bronze, the copper and tin that composed it, acted as both the engine and the currency. The production chain was immense, requiring a coordinated effort from the miner digging ore out of a dark, dangerous tunnel, to the smelter tending roaring furnaces, to the skilled artisan casting intricate objects, and finally to the merchant or diplomat who transported the finished goods across continents. This wasn't a side activity, it was a central pillar of the state, requiring a level of organization that fundamentally shaped early societies. The ability to muster and manage this complex operation, to feed the forges, equip the armies, and supply the workshops was the ultimate test of a ruler's power and the primary determinant of a civilization's wealth. This control over metal sources became the grand chessboard of international geopolitics, where controlling a mine could be more valuable than winning a battle. The most famous rivalry, the struggle between the Hittite Empire and New Kingdom Egypt for dominance over the Levant, was fueled as much by the need for Cypriot copper as it was by territorial ambition. Cyprus, which the ancients called Alashia, was the superpower of copper production. Its output was so critical that the Hittites and Egyptians engaged in a tense, decades-long Cold War to secure alliances with the island's rulers and guarantee their share of the metal flowing from its mines. A surviving letter from the Hittite king to the ruler of Cyprus practically begs for a shipment of copper, highlighting the desperate dependency even great empires had on this single resource. Losing access could mean being unable to arm new regiments of soldiers, leading to military vulnerability and economic collapse. Winning that access, on the other hand, could fund further expansion, creating a powerful feedback loop where metal equaled military might, which in turn secured more metal. But how do we move from knowing they traded to understanding the scale and mechanics of that trade? This is where the chemical fingerprints of bronze transform from interesting science into a powerful tool for economic history. By analyzing the lead isotope ratios in thousands of artifacts, researchers can do something astonishing. They can start to model ancient markets. They can estimate the output of specific mines over centuries, trace the rise and fall of certain trade routes, and even identify periods of economic boom or bust. For instance, a sudden and widespread shift in bronze signatures across Greece away from Cypriot copper and towards a new source might indicate a political rupture that severed a traditional trade route, forcing a desperate search for alternatives. Conversely, the discovery of a huge concentration of artifacts with a specific signature in a port city paints a picture of that city's role as a major distribution hub. This data allows historians to move beyond the vague descriptions in ancient texts and build quantitative models, estimating the volume of goods moved and the sheer economic value they represented. In this world before the invention of coinage, bronze itself was money. While everyday market barter might have involved grain, livestock, or cloth for large-scale, state-level transactions, bronze was the standard of value. This is brilliantly illustrated by the discovery of countless bronze ingots, especially the iconic oxhide shape, in shipwrecks and storerooms. These ingots weren't just convenient lumps of metal, they were pre-weighed, standardized units of currency. Their value was inherent in their weight and purity. A surviving Hittite text details the cost of various commodities in shekels of silver, but it also carefully notes the equivalent value in copper, showing a fixed exchange rate between the two metals. We even have records of wages being paid in bronze. This system created a truly international currency. An oxhide ingot cast on Cyprus would be recognized and accepted as payment from a palace in Mesopotamia to a merchant in Mycenaean Greece, its value understood across language and cultural barriers. The metal was both the commodity and the means of buying it, a dual role that streamlined complex long-distance trade and allowed for the accumulation of vast wealth in a tangible, durable form. The organization of labor around bronze production offers a fascinating window into the social structure of these early economies. The entire operation, from mining to casting, was brutally difficult and highly specialized. This required a massive investment in human capital. It's likely that mining and primary smelting were often state-controlled industries, worked by a combination of slaves, conscripted laborers, and specialized workers who were tied to their profession. The scale of slag heaps at ancient mining sites speaks to centuries of continuous, intensive effort involving hundreds, if not thousands, of people. Then, the metal would be passed to highly skilled artisans, the smiths and casters who transformed raw ingots into works of art, tools, and weapons. These craftsmen held a privileged and powerful position in society, often working under direct royal patronage and guarding their technical knowledge as a valuable trade secret. The economic system had to support this entire pyramid of labor, from feeding the miners to rewarding the master smiths, all funneling resources towards the ultimate goal of producing more bronze. This concentration of specialized labor around a single, critical industry was a foundational step in the development of complex, stratified societies, proving that economic complexity and social complexity grew hand in hand, forged in the fires of the bronze workshop. Yet this incredible historical record, locked within the metal for millennia, faces a constant and insidious threat the moment it is unearthed. The very process that creates bronze's beautiful patina, a stable, often green or blue surface layer of corrosion, is the same process that, if left unchecked, can slowly and irrevocably destroy the object from the inside out. This corrosion is a chemical reaction between the metal and its environment, and the catalysts are everywhere: moisture in the air, salts from the soil or from human hands, and even pollutants like sulfur dioxide in modern atmospheres. For a bronze artifact, leaving the stable, if harsh, conditions of its burial site and entering a new environment is the beginning of a new battle for survival, one where conservators act as its guardians. One of the most dreaded and destructive forms of decay is called bronze disease. Despite its name, it's not a biological infection but a particularly aggressive electrochemical corrosion cycle. It begins when chloride salts from the soil, seawater, or even fertilizers become trapped within the corrosion layers on the bronze. In the presence of even tiny amounts of moisture, these chlorides react with the copper in the alloy to form a powdery, light green substance called copper chloride. This compound is highly unstable, and when it reacts with moisture and oxygen, it converts back to copper corrosion products, releasing the chloride ions to start the destructive process all over again. This cycle is like a cancer for the metal. It doesn't stop. It will steadily eat through the bronze, forming pits and powdery eruptions that can reduce a solid object to a fragile, crumbling shell, all while the chloride core remains active, ready to spread. Simply sealing the object in a display case does nothing to stop this internal reaction. It can continue its slow destruction in apparent silence. To combat this, conservators have developed a sophisticated arsenal of techniques, each with its own trade-offs. One common method is mechanical cleaning, using tiny dental tools, scalpels, and even micro-abrasive systems under a microscope to physically remove corrosive layers. This is painstaking work that requires immense skill to avoid damaging the original metal surface beneath. For more severe cases, especially those involving bronze disease, a chemical treatment called electrolytic reduction might be used. The artifact is placed in a mild chemical solution and a very low electrical current is applied. This current effectively reverses the corrosion process, drawing the harmful chloride ions out of the metal and into the solution. It's a highly effective treatment, but it requires extreme caution, as it can also potentially alter the metal's microstructure or affect those all-important trace elements that carry its geographic signature. Perhaps the most forward-thinking approach involves collaboration before any treatment even begins. Modern conservation is a dialogue between the conservator, the archaeologist, and the materials scientist. Before a single speck of corrosion is removed, the object is thoroughly documented using photography, X-radiography to see its internal structure, and non-invasive analysis like portable XRF to map its surface composition. This initial snapshot provides a crucial baseline. A scientist might advise a conservator to leave a specific area of corrosion untouched because it shields a pristine metal surface that could be vital for future isotopic analysis. Conversely, a conservator might identify an area of active bronze disease that threatens the object's structural integrity, requiring immediate and localized intervention. This partnership ensures that every action taken is informed, minimizing the loss of historical data while maximizing the object's long-term stability. The goal is no longer just to make an artifact look aesthetically pleasing for a museum display. It is to stabilize it as a historical document, preserving its physical integrity and its hidden chemical text for the next generation of researchers whose tools and questions we cannot yet even imagine. The tools we use to listen to bronze stories are themselves evolving at a breathtaking pace, pushing the boundaries of what we can learn without ever touching an artifact. Imagine a future archaeologist walking through a museum gallery not with a drill, but with a handheld device that can, from a few feet away, perform a full isotopic analysis of a sealed display case object using a harmless laser. This isn't science fiction, it's the imminent next chapter in archaeometallurgy. Researchers are already developing portable laser ablation systems that can vaporize a mere few nanograms of material, an amount so small it leaves no visible mark, yet provides enough data for a precise lead isotope reading. This technology would revolutionize museum science, allowing for the analysis of the world's most priceless and protected artifacts, the golden death mask of Agamemnon, the intricately inlaid daggers from the ritual vessels of the Shang dynasty, all without the slightest risk of damage. We could build a truly global database of metallic fingerprints, sampling treasures that have been completely off-limits to destructive analysis, potentially rewriting trade maps with a single, non-invasive scan. This explosion of data is where artificial intelligence steps in, not as a replacement for human expertise, but as the ultimate research assistant. Right now, identifying the source of a bronze artifact involves scientists manually comparing its chemical signature against a growing but still limited database of known mines. AI can process this same task on a scale that is humanly impossible. Machine learning algorithms can be trained to pattern match across millions of data points, cross-referencing trace element concentrations and isotope ratios from thousands of artifacts with geological surveys of entire continents. The power of AI lies in its ability to find subtle, hidden correlations that a human eye might miss. It could identify a previously unknown cluster of artifacts all sharing a unique chemical signature, pointing conclusively to a lost mine that hasn't been operational for 3 millennia. It could analyze the slight variations in alloy recipes across a region and pinpoint the specific workshop where an object was made, tracing the migration of a single master smith through their metallic signature. This isn't just about efficiency, it's about discovering entirely new narratives hidden in plain sight within the vast and complex data we are only just beginning to collect. Alongside these high-tech leaps, there is a powerful and necessary movement to expand the geographic scope of our research, to finally globalize the story of bronze. For too long, the narrative has been disproportionately focused on the well-trodden paths of the Mediterranean and the Near East. The next frontier lies in continents like Africa and South America, where bronze and other copper alloys were used in sophisticated and unique ways that are only beginning to be understood. In Africa, the magnificent bronze casting traditions of West Africa, such as those of the Benin and Ife kingdoms, are world-renowned for their artistic mastery, but their metallurgical history remains shrouded in mystery. Where did the copper and tin originate? Were there vast local trade networks across the Sahara that supplied these materials? Detailed isotopic studies of these beautiful sculptures could map a completely unknown economic web, revealing connections between forest kingdoms and desert Tuareg traders that would fundamentally alter our understanding of African history. Similarly, in South America, while the Incas are famous for their gold and silver, earlier cultures like the Moche and the Sicon were master bronze workers. Analyzing their artifacts could reveal whether they sourced their materials from the rich mines of the Andes or developed trade for exotic metals from the Amazon basin, painting a picture of interregional connectivity that rivals that of the ancient Mediterranean. Perhaps the most intimate level of future research will focus not on vast trade networks, but on the individual choices of the ancient artisan. This is the world of microscale analysis, where scientists use instruments like scanning electron microscopes to examine the metal at a microscopic level. By studying the microstructure of a bronze object, the size and shape of the crystals within the metal, researchers can reverse engineer the entire manufacturing process. They can determine the temperature at which it was cast, how quickly it was cooled, and whether it was subsequently hammered, annealed, or cold worked to improve its strength. This allows us to step into the Bronze Age workshop and watch the smith at work. We can identify the specific technical traditions of a community. Did they quench their swords in water to harden them, an advanced technique that risked cracking the blade? Did they repeatedly heat and hammer their tools to refine the metal's grain structure? This microscale insight transforms anonymous artifacts into personal stories of skill, experimentation, and passed down knowledge, connecting us directly to the hands that forged them thousands of years ago. The ultimate promise of all these future directions is a more democratic and complete human story. As portable tech allows for analysis in remote field locations, as AI crunches global datasets, and as we finally turn our scientific attention to the overlooked bronze traditions of the world, we are moving towards a truly inclusive history. We are on the cusp of being able to weave together the metallic narratives of the Viking navigator, the Chinese ritual master, the Benin sculptor, and the Andean king into a single, interconnected tapestry of human innovation. Each new technological breakthrough is another tool for listening, and bronze has been waiting a very long time to tell us the rest of its story. The next decade of discovery will likely reveal that the ancient world was even more dynamic, more connected, and more creatively brilliant than we have ever dared to imagine. The story of bronze is far more than a tale of ancient artifacts. It's a living classroom offering profound lessons that resonate powerfully with the challenges and opportunities we face today. By exploring how ancient civilizations sourced, traded, and innovated with this metal, we uncover timeless themes of sustainability, reminding us that resource management has always been a cornerstone of societal resilience. We see incredible innovation born from necessity as metallurgists experimented with alloys and techniques to overcome material limitations, And perhaps most strikingly, we witness a deep global interconnectedness, proving that our ancestors were part of a complex worldwide network long before the term globalization was ever coined. These aren't just historical footnotes, they are urgent, relevant conversations about how we manage our planet's resources, foster creativity, and build cooperative international relationships in our own time. This rich narrative provides a perfect framework for interdisciplinary education, seamlessly weaving together subjects that are too often kept in separate silos. A single bronze arrowhead can become the centerpiece of a lesson that spans history, chemistry, geology, economics, and art. Students can explore the historical context of the battle it might have been used in, then shift to the science lab to analyze its elemental composition using portable X-ray fluorescence scanners, simulating the same non-destructive techniques professionals use. They can then use geology maps to trace those elements back to potential mining regions, and finally, discuss the economic implications of such long-distance trade in a social studies class. This holistic approach doesn't just make learning more engaging, it mirrors the real world where complex problems are never solved by a single discipline working in isolation. It teaches young minds to think in connections, to see the bigger picture, and to appreciate the multifaceted nature of human endeavor. Museums and educational institutions are already pioneering exciting programs to bring this interdisciplinary vision to life. The British Museum, for instance, offers virtual workshops where students can examine high-resolution 3D models of Bronze Age objects from the Uluburun shipwreck, using software tools to take measurements and discuss their function. Other initiatives, like the EU-funded Platinum Project, have developed educational kits that allow students to cast their own small bronze objects using ancient techniques, giving them a visceral, hands-on understanding of the skill and precision required. There are even interactive online simulations that let players manage a Bronze Age kingdom, making decisions about resource allocation, trade diplomacy, and technological investment, with their success directly tied to their understanding of archaeometallurgy. These programs transform students from passive recipients of information into active investigators, empowering them to ask their own questions and draw their own conclusions from the evidence. The ultimate goal of this educational push is to foster a new generation of critical thinkers and curious minds who appreciate that technology and progress are not linear but are deeply human stories of trial, error, and collaboration. By understanding the ingenuity behind an ancient alloy, students gain a profound respect for the knowledge systems of past cultures, moving beyond a simplistic view of history that labels eras as primitive. They learn that innovation is often a slow, cumulative process built on centuries of shared knowledge across cultures. This perspective is invaluable in our rapidly changing world, as it cultivates humility, resilience, and a long-term view of human progress. It inspires curiosity not just about where we came from, but about the materials that will shape our future, from the silicon in our chips to the lithium in our batteries, creating a citizenry that is more thoughtful and informed about the very substance of our modern world. But how do these incredible stories, decoded in laboratories through complex science, make their way to us, the public, the crucial bridge between the high-tech world of archaeometallurgy and the curious visitor is built within the halls of our great museums. These institutions have undergone a quiet revolution, transforming from static galleries of beautiful objects into dynamic storytelling spaces where the narrative of an artifact now includes its incredible, invisible journey. It's no longer enough to display a magnificent Mycenaean sword in a glass case with a card that simply says, "Bronze, circa 1400 BCE. Today, that same sword might be accompanied by a large, colorful map on the wall behind it. As you approach, an interactive light display activates, tracing a glowing line from the mines of Cyprus to a smelting site in Greece, and finally to the archaeological find spot of the sword itself. This isn't just a display, it's a visual narrative that instantly communicates a saga of trade, technology, and human connection that the object alone could never tell. This shift towards interactive, science-driven storytelling is what makes modern museum exhibits so powerful. At the British Museum, for instance, their displays on the ancient Mediterranean often feature small touchscreen kiosks next to key bronze artifacts. A visitor can tap on an oxhide ingot recovered from a shipwreck and instantly call up a short, animated video showing how such ingots were cast in sand molds, then carried onto ships by teams of men using poles slotted through their distinctive protruding handles. Another tap might overlay the chemical data onto a geographic map, showing the specific isotopic signature that pinpoints its origin to Cyprus. This multi-sensory approach, combining the tangible, three-dimensional reality of the ancient object with digital reconstructions and hard data, catapults the visitor directly into the story. It demystifies the science by showing its practical results, allowing a 12-year-old to grasp the concept of isotopic sourcing by seeing its dramatic conclusion on a map. They're not just learning history, they're learning how history is discovered. The Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York takes this integration a step further, weaving metallurgical insights directly into the fundamental identity of their objects. In their galleries of ancient Chinese art, the label for a majestic Shang Dynasty Ding vessel doesn't just describe its ritual use and beautiful Taote motifs. It explicitly discusses the piece mold casting technique and how the high tin content of the alloy was essential for achieving the fluidity needed to capture such intricate detail and the resonant ring that was so important in ceremonies. The how and the why are presented as inseparable from the what. This reframes our appreciation of the object. We are no longer just admiring a beautiful old pot. We are marveling at the product of a sophisticated, state-controlled industry that understood material science on an intuitive level. The museum becomes a translator, converting the complex language of lead isotope ratios and trace element analysis into a compelling story of human ingenuity that any visitor, regardless of their scientific background, can understand and enjoy. Beyond the physical museum walls, this public engagement has exploded into the digital realm, creating a global classroom. Many institutions now offer extensive online collections where you can explore high-resolution photographs of bronze artifacts from every angle, often accompanied by detailed curatorial notes that include the latest scientific findings. The Rijksmuseum van Oudheden in Leiden, Netherlands, for example, has fantastic virtual exhibits where you can digitally handle a Bronze Age sword, zooming in to see the corrosion details that might hold chemical clues, all while listening to a conservator explain the process of analysis. Social media platforms have become another powerful tool, with conservators and curators from museums like the Getty sharing behind-the-scenes glimpses on Instagram and TikTok. Short videos of an X-ray fluorescence gun being used on a Roman statue, or a time-lapse of a delicate conservation treatment. This transparency pulls back the curtain, showing the public that archaeology is an ongoing, dynamic science, not just a collection of dusty discoveries from a century ago. The ultimate goal of all this effort is to create a more profound and personal connection to the past. When a visitor learns that the bracelet they are looking at contains tin from a mine in Cornwall, that knowledge forges a tangible link across thousands of years and miles. It transforms the artifact from a distant, abstract relic into a product of a vast, interconnected world that feels surprisingly familiar. It encourages us to see ourselves in these ancient people, to recognize their ambitions, their logistical challenges, and their desire for beauty and connection. By making the science of bronze accessible and exciting, museums do more than just preserve objects. They preserve the sprawling, interconnected human stories those objects represent, ensuring that the lessons of resilience, innovation, and global citizenship from the Bronze Age continue to inspire and inform us today. From the fiery smelters of ancient Anatolia to the sacred ritual vessels of the Shang dynasty, bronze has woven itself into the very fabric of human history, not just as a material of invention, but as a living archive. Its chemical signatures have become our most reliable map, charting the forgotten journeys of civilizations across oceans and continents, revealing connections we never knew existed. We've traced the arteries of vast trade networks that moved this metal like lifeblood, witnessed the profound cultural exchanges it facilitated as styles and technologies crossed borders, and marveled at the relentless technological innovations born in smoky workshops. We've even seen how the pursuit of bronze could build empires and how its scarcity could contribute to their fall. This entire endeavor, this decoding of metallic whispers, stands as a powerful testament to our innate human curiosity, a deep, enduring desire to reach across the millennia and understand our shared story, to find our place in the long arc of human endeavor. And the most exciting part is that this story is far from finished. As our scientific tools grow ever more sophisticated, with non-invasive lasers and artificial intelligence poised to read these metallic archives without leaving a mark, who can possibly imagine what other secrets bronze will yield? What lost mines will we discover from a single dagger's trace elements? What forgotten trade partnerships will be revealed by an AI cross referencing thousands of isotopic signatures? The next chapter of discovery promises to be even more revolutionary, uncovering deeper layers of connection and complexity in the ancient world. These ancient narratives of resource scarcity, technological adaptation, and global interdependence resonate with a startling clarity in our own modern era. We live in a time defined by global supply chains for rare earth elements essential to our electronics, by debates over sustainable resource management, and by a deep awareness of our interconnectedness. The Bronze Age reminds us that these are not new challenges, but rather enduring themes of the human experience. Their story encourages us to look at our own world with a longer perspective, to see our current material innovations as part of a continuum of human ingenuity that stretches back over 5,000 years. This journey through the Age of Bronze shows us that history is not just found in grand palaces and written on crumbling scrolls. It is locked in the humble, enduring metal of a simple tool, a broken weapon, or a shattered piece of jewelry. It is a story waiting to be heard if we only learn how to listen. What ancient civilization or bronze artifact captured your imagination the most? Was it the vast trade networks of the Mycenaean Greeks, the intricate ritual vessels of the Shang dynasty, or perhaps the mysterious seafaring culture that went down with the Uluburun ship? We are genuinely curious to hear which part of this metallic journey resonated with you personally. Share your thoughts and favorite stories in the comments below. Let's get a conversation going about these incredible connections across time. If this exploration into the hidden signatures of bronze offered you a new perspective, if you learned something that surprised you or made you see history a little differently, then please do take a second to like this video. It truly helps us continue creating content like this. For more deep dives into the mysteries of our past, from lost technologies to forgotten empires, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to miss a single one of our new releases, hitting that bell icon is the best way to stay notified the moment we publish. Thank you so much for spending your time with us on this journey through the ancient world. Your curiosity is what makes exploring these stories so rewarding. Keep asking questions, keep seeking answers, and as always, keep exploring the wonders